I'm not going to do a stupid long intro. Here are my favorite Song of Ice and Fire chapters. Before I get to the top 10, I want to honorably mention Cersei 4, A Feast for Crows. Everyone loves small council scenes, and this is by far the most entertaining. George demonstrates really just how reckless, unqualified political shot callers are, with Cersei's purge of Tyrells basically leaving her with an even worse small council than she would hope for. There isn't any of the hauntingly beautiful prose or compelling character moments that'll be present throughout this list, but this chapter is simply hilarious and a joy to read every time. Cersei goes from being so proud of herself for purging Tyrell sympathizers from her court to then thinking why bother with this council at all when they don't affirm my belief that 13-year-old Sansa should be tortured. It's just a great chapter, and I love it. Kicking off my list at number 10, I have Arya 6, A Storm of Swords, which is a fantastic chapter. Arya's point of view reputation is sometimes murky in the Song of Ice and Fire fandom, understandably for me, but her chapters, when they don't feel like overkill, are very strong and feel so inhabited, like this one. The Hollow Hill is really just a fascinating setting that is worthy of one of the coolest sword duels in all of fiction, in my opinion. And we get to see one of Sandor's finest moments in the series, where he sees the Brotherhood degenerating from the once noble cause they used to represent. Now, of course, George is using Sandor as a cynic who doesn't even care to find the original cause of the Brotherhood as noble, but George uses Sandor to point out hypocrisy in the Brotherhood, who claimed to fight for Robert, who was objectively a terrible king. There's just a lot of back and forth arguments being made here by both sides that enrich the story's themes about war and what makes a true knight, both of which, when deployed, lead to some of George's best writing, in my opinion. Going from one Stark kid point of view who has a muddled reputation to another, except this one I heavily disagree with the fandom on, we have Bran 4, Storm of Swords. I think this chapter is so strong on its own, but it's really its placement that catapults it to this list. At this point in A Storm of Swords, we see the fallout of the brutal climax of the War of the Five Kings at the Red Wedding. Then we get Jon 7, A Storm of Swords, which is a heartbreaking, thrilling chapter. Then we get a mythological horror in Bran 4, Storm of Swords. In this chapter, Bran arrives at the Night Fort. We hear these incredible tales of the Rat Cook and the Night's King, the former clearly historical parallel to the abomination that was bestowed on Bran's family just a few chapters ago. These myths loom so large in this abandoned spooky castle on the wall and really strengthen the fantastical elements of this story and this region, this world that I adore so much. George is really just the best at strengthening his story through historical lore, and this is a magnum opus in that regard. And if we had only gotten these creepy tales in a similar format to an earlier Bran chapter about the Night of the Laughing Tree, that still would have been spectacular. But George goes even deeper, literally, about the potential creepy history of the Wall, and Bran and company descend this well down to the Black Gate, which is a scene Michael talks about stuff as theorized on in an incredible video, which I'll link down below. It's a great chapter that just speaks for itself, honestly. Next up, I have Jaime 1, A Feast for Crows. This chapter finds Jaime dealing with rapidly changing circumstances in his family and learning ways to move forward and reflecting on the past in what makes for a maximally entertaining read. Jaime standing vigil over his father's rotting corpse for days allows such an unprecedented, intimate view into his mind and thoughts that is compelling throughout. Whether it's memories of Rhaegar, Arthur Dayne, his realization that Cersei only comes in when she needs something from him, which is incredibly called back on in his last chapter in the book, or his chat with Tommen. All of this is George getting into the heads of his character in such an exemplary way. It's an underappreciated Jaime chapter and my 8th favorite in the series. Number 7, I have Jon 10, A Dance with Dragons, which is really just everything I'd want in a Jon chapter. You have Jon at his most admirable, evolving from book 1 when he thought wildlings were evil people, to uniting them in this emotional and ethereally written wedding between Alicent and Sigorn that is such a pivotal moment in the series, where the bridge between the Watch and the wildlings is finally built after a centuries-long divide. Not only that, but seeing this bastard and an awesome character we just learned about a few chapters ago being the ones to likely reunite the Starks and Karstarks after their falling out is such a great nugget. But you also have great and hilarious lines where Jon and Alice make japes about Selyse, and Jon being snarky to the recently imprisoned Craig and Karstark is just a great bit. There isn't a sentence wasted here. This one has always stood out to me, and not just among Jon's incredible run and dance, but in the entire series. Which kind of makes me wonder why it goes under the radar on these types of lists, but anyway. Maester Crescent's prologue is possibly the most efficient chapter in the series in terms of accomplishing its purposes, which is funny because it's also one of the longest in the series. While the Game of Thrones prologue gives us a glimpse into the supernatural coming back into this world, this prologue is our first chapter where this new age of gods and heroes and magic has fully begun. And to show an old maester dealing with these circumstances was such a great choice by George to convey this in such a convincing way. If not more important purpose of this chapter is to introduce us to the one true king, Stannis Baratheon, and his supporting cast. And man, is it efficient at doing just that. Stannis' character here is made abundantly clear. A pragmatic military commander who seethes with resentment for those who have wronged him. Of course, this isn't very admirable at first, but it's all what comes after that makes Stannis such a beloved character. But every seed, such as his shades of heroism, is planted here, and that is what will always make this one of my favorites for being such an incredible character focus and introduction. Bravo, George. Next up at number 5, I have Sansa 7, A Storm of Swords. Never has it been easier to empathize with a character than Sansa in this beautiful but sad chapter. After having to affirm her family were traitors, lose that family, lose her identity, and be trapped in the sky with her dysfunctional aunt and creep captor, we see Sansa cathartically build Winterfell as a means to finally express her love for her family and her longing for home in such a beautiful scene. Seeing Sansa being reinvigorated and for the first time embracing her historic identity and drawing strength from it is such a great breakthrough for her character. And if the incredibly powerful character work for Sansa isn't enough, there's this achingly beautiful prose littered throughout this chapter, along with the tying up the War of the Five Kings with Littlefinger and Lysa, revealing what actually started this whole ordeal, and of course, only Cat. Just an instant classic and a favorite of anyone who loves this series. That leads me to number 4 on this list, which is Daenerys 10, A Game of Thrones. This is one of the most beloved and iconic pieces of writing George has ever produced, simple as that. It's an epic culmination of Targaryen history, and if you subscribe to the theory that this is the exact moment that's been dreamed about and foreseen by numerous Targaryens, it just adds to the scale of this chapter. It's just an utterly jaw-dropping end to Daenerys' arc in A Game of Thrones, and such a huge leap for the series in terms of its fantastical aspirations. Everyone recognizes that this is one of the best chapters for good reason, and there isn't much I can add to it that hasn't already been said. Just earth-shattering writing from start to finish. That's all I can say. Brand 3 A Dance with Dragons is another chapter that tips over the series' fantastical scale and outright shatters it in the most satisfying way. Yeah, it probably has single-handedly complicated and delayed George's writing process, but who cares? This is the ultimate payoff to Bran's long journey and the mysteries about the children of the forest, the North, and Bloodhaven, which have gone completely unanswered until this point. Sorta. It is so evident how much of George's soul was poured into this incredible chapter. The prose is consistently poetic, haunting, and as elegant as it's ever been. These are new heights for the series that may never be replicated again. If the last part of this chapter, quote unquote, Brandon Stark could taste the blood, doesn't chill you to the bones, I question your love of fiction in general. If the weight of history looms over Bran 4 Storm of Swords, it absolutely engulfs the reader here. I could wax poetic about this chapter for hours, but alas, this one continues to endear itself to me each time I read the series and leaves me speechless every time. Sometimes a man just wants hype moments and aura, and the Kingbreaker from A Dance with Dragons has it in droves, and then some. It also has a fantastic point of view character facing conflict in his heart as he plays the Game of Thrones. Seeing into Barristan's head as a seasoned warrior and legendary knight who knows so much about Westerosi history and has a lifetime of court memories allows for an incredible read. There's just something about Barristan finally making political moves after he's seen regimes he served fall because of his oath to inaction, let alone in a country completely foreign to him, that just tickles my brain in the best way. There's just layers and layers to this chapter and so many things I love, whether it's vintage George plotting with Barristan's story directly affecting the events in The Dragon Tamer, which is also a fantastic chapter by the way, the parallels to Ned's attempted coup in A Game of Thrones, Barristan's love for Daenerys that springs him into action. This is really just George at his best, and it absolutely makes the Essos plot haters look illiterate. This is just a special chapter that I tend to go back and forth with the next chapter as to which is my number 1. Myrni's Not Be Damned. This is it. The pinnacle of George R. R. Martin's writing. Everything that I love and obsess over in this series is here in its strongest forms. The synchronicity between storylines with all the Riverland stories seemingly merging together, superb character growth, the coolest dream sequence in the series, awesome action, and of course, quote-unquote, I dreamed of you. The most strikingly beautiful line in the series. I struggle to put into words just how perfect this execution is and just how strong of a way this is to end the chapter. I guess I really am just a sucker for the classic trope of a maiden being rescued by a gallant knight, but George's take is executed in such a way that's so unique and heart-wrenching. This character, who we've seen defenestrate a child, do some incest, and be nothing but an antagonist in the first book, gets hints of a more complex character in A Clash of Kings, but it just explodes in this chapter. I really love how Jaime's dream of him fighting side by side with Brienne immediately comes true when Jaime shows his knightly instincts and jumps into the bear pit to save Brienne. There's just layers to this scene, and I could talk about it for hours, but we'll save that for another day. This is my favorite chapter in A Song of Ice and Fire. Simple. Thank you so much for watching. This list was incredibly difficult to narrow down, and I know there's some glaring omissions, but if you could please do the like and subscribe thing. I don't know, I'm kind of new here, so bye.